Hello and welcome. We are having a special edition of Women Winning Their Way. I'm your host, Clara Capano, and today we are talking about what it means to be a trailblazer. On the show, we highlight stories of how we as professional women can really leave those messages and inspire others with strategies, with knowledge, with just the energy to ignite them to go out and create that path to success and do it all on their terms. But what does it mean to really blaze a trail? Because we don't want to leave messages just for today's women. We want to leave it for the future generation of everyone. So, to help with the conversation, I am bringing in three of my most favorite ladies that I have worked with, networked with, collaborated with, and honestly just have so much fun with. And we are going to be talking about what it means to be a trailblazer. So, women, welcome, welcome. And what I'd love to do is just go around the circle real quick and just ask you each, maybe just, in 30 seconds or a minute, kind of just introduce where you are in the world and what it is you do. So, Leslie, we'll start with you.
All right, going straight into it. What's up, everybody? My name is Leslie Lew, and I'm the founder of a company called Reclaiming Your Courage. I'm a global speaker and humanitarian, and I also co-founded a women's global movement called Warrior Queens Rise. And so what I do is I empower women through bold transformations through a holistic approach to self-defense. So really how to stand in your power and be a stronger self-advocate.
Yeah, fantastic. So beautiful. Rochel, tell us about
Well,
you.
hello everyone. I am Rochel Marie Lawson. I'm known as the Queen of Feeling Fabulous. I am a multi-successful entrepreneur. I started the first woman-owned, minority-owned telecommunications installation company in the United States back in 1990, and I still am the commander-in-chief of that corporation. But I also started Blissful Living for You, which is a company that is focused on helping women to really step into living and having the life of their dreams by balancing the pillars of wellness, wisdom, and wealth. And like my gals here, Leslie Lew, I have created a movement called the Brave, Bold, Unstoppable Woman Summit, which is women's movement, which is all about bringing collaborative women like us that are brave, bold, and unstoppable, and allowing us to just resonate with each other, support each other, collaborate with each other, and build our vision of what it is for what we want to do in the world, and take that around the world so that we can empower other ladies, so that we can stand together and be the change agents to make the world a better place. And you got to be brave, bold, and unstoppable to do that.
Absolutely. Nicely said.
Love
And
it.
Jen Potter, introduce yourself to us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm so honored to be here with these amazing women. So I am a serial entrepreneur. I own several businesses here in Massachusetts on the East Coast, and I, just like everyone else on this call, I actually have a conference as well called the Empower Your Epic Self Conference to empower women to come together to collaborate over competition. And I think that's why we're all here. It's because all of us have that same thought process of there is no competition, and that's how we've met, right? And we've just been able to do all of these amazing things together. And by doing that, I feel like I couldn't stop smiling. Like I'm listening to everybody talk and I have like this big smile on my face. I'm like, oh, it kind of hurts because I'm just loving everything that everyone's saying. So thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So for those of you that are following along, you can see why I chose these women. I mean, these women are making things happen, and not just for themselves, but man, they are paving the way. So I want to start our conversation off by what you think it means to be a trailblazer. When you hear that word, like, what does it unlock inside of you, and how do you define that? So Rochelle, let's go ahead and start with you. What does it mean to be a trailblazer for you?
To create your own path. So we all have something we want to do, and sometimes people want to follow in other people's path. But to be a true trailblazer, it's creating your own path when no one's going to let you go down their path. And that's what I did with my telecom company. I couldn't get hired as an electrical engineer in Silicon Valley. So if I can't get hired, you know what? I'll start my own business. And that's what I did. So it's creating your own path, and you create the rules that you ebb and flow on your path, and you allow others to come and follow your path with grace. And you just support each and every one where they are to get to where they want to be.
Love it. Beautiful. Jen, what about you? How do you define it?
I think that was very well said. And, you know, as soon as I started really thinking about what it means to be a trailblazer, you know, it's that own path. And for me, it's, you know, as I was kind of growing up, I always was told, you know, what if you did just one thing? So if anyone who knows me, right, I told you a little bit about what I do, but I didn't even talk about all the things that I do because I do so many different things. And I think that's why we all have so many things in common because we have done so many different things and we have our hands in a lot of different places. But that's what makes us successful because we have this ability to create and be innovative and do all of these things. But if I was to listen to those who said just stick to one thing, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. So I was able to create my own path by continuing to do all of the things that make me happy. And then in return, other people are able to say, wow, if she can do it, I can do it. And then I'm like, here we go, let's do it together.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's really powerful because I think, again, so many times, and there's nothing wrong if that's what you want. So many times people are just like, just do one thing. And I think one of the things that all of us have in common is why? You know, when we can do so much more and be able to
correct.
impact on so many different levels. And, you know, sometimes I almost wish I could be happy just doing one thing,
Same.
but there's just so many avenues that I want to serve in. So I appreciate you saying that. And Leslie, let's come to you. How do you define being a trailblazer?
Woo! I'm a fuse together some Rochel and Jen energy, and I
Mhm.
totally agree. When I think about being a trailblazer, it's having the courage to forge your own path, to pour gasoline over it, light it on fire, and while everyone's going left, you're going to go right unapologetically. You're going
Yeah.
this way. And
Mhm.
once you make it to the other side, you reach out your hand to another sister and another woman and say, there's another way.
Mhm.
And I'm going to show you. And the reason why that resonates with me and being a trailblazer so much is like, look, I'm a woman of color in entrepreneurship. I am teaching self-defense in a way that's not about eye pokes and groin kicks, right? It's a very male dominated kind of art. So for a woman to come at the forefront and say, this is my system that I created that I believe helps women step into their power in a way that no one has seen and
Mhm.
walking them through that framework, that makes me want to shit my pants. But it's also the very thing that makes me a trailblazer because
Mhm.
I'm not asking permission. I'm not seeking external validation. I'm doing this because this is what I'm meant to do and this is how I want to serve the world.
Yeah. And Leslie, I don't know if you know this, but that story that you told about going through the fire and then reaching your hand out to another person to bring them with you. I remember we actually shared that on another show that you and I were both on with Dr. Michelle Thomas. And you said that. That is what sparked this whole conversation here today. Because I think that's something that all three of us have in common is it's not just about making our mark, but it's about paving the way and encouraging others to join in. Because again, we grow so much stronger when we all start working together. So this might sound like a very easy question, but I want to go a little bit deeper into this. You know, we talk about being a trailblazer. We all said similar things in different ways of, again, forging forward. And if the path isn't there, we have to create the path for us. But at the heart of this, why is this really so important? So I don't know who wants to jump in and start the conversation. I'll just open it up. But why is being a trailblazer, you know, so important and in making a difference in this world?
I'll
I'll
go.
jump in. Oh, okay. You go, Rochelle.
No, you go. Then I'll go. I'll piggyback
We
off
got so
you.
much love here. So
I
it's
know.
like double Dutch. It's like, who
I
wants to
love
go
it.
first? I'll keep mine short because I know Rochelle's going to say something beautiful. But the reason why it's so important is because to Jen's point earlier, it's not about competition. It's letting other women know that they're not alone. It's letting them know that there's enough for everyone to thrive. And if that helps a woman anywhere in the world up level herself, she up levels her family, she up levels her for generations to come, then we up level the world. So it's not just about us in our box. This is really about contributing to humanity, and really fostering compassion and love with people, I feel.
Mm-hmm. I think that's well said. Thanks.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to piggyback. I think I was always a trailblazer, even as a little girl, and I didn't know it. But I was always that one that had that mouth. I'm the only girl in my generation of grandkids, right? And so in the early 70s, I went to try out for Major League Baseball with two of my friends that were boys, rode our bikes 2 miles, got there, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, honey, softball tryouts are in 2 weeks." And I'm like, "Well, I didn't come here to play no softball." Long story short, they weren't going to let me try out. But lo and behold, some mom said, "Just let her try out. What is it going to do? How is it? It's not going to hurt anything." I tried out, and when I was trying out, I remember the coach standing in between the pitcher's mound and home plate throwing the ball, and I was tagging it because I could play. I could play. Long story short, by the end of tryouts, the coaches were arguing about who was going to get me on their team. And when I got on the team, I started 10 and 11-year-old. I started at second base. I made the All-Star those 2 years. But for me, I was just out there having fun playing with my friends. I didn't know that I was the first girl in Northern California to play Major League Baseball because they didn't do that in the 70s, right? Early 70s. It was like girls over here, boys over here. And so I think for me, it just gives other women, young ladies, the permission to say, if somebody tells you no, you do it anyways, because you're the only one that can control your destiny. And if you let people stop you from breaking those glass ceilings or busting through that door, then you don't only do a dissatisfaction or disservice to yourself, you do it for our women, other women. And so I think it's really, really important that if someone tells you no, you figure out a way to make it a yes. And then you show them and make them regret. Okay, I'm being a little spiteful, being a little catty, but you show them and make them regret that they told you no in the first place. Now, all those coaches that didn't want me to try out, because it was tough, and I was adamant. I had rode my bike 2 miles. I'm not going back home. Are you kidding me? I know they regret it because once that coach who did got me on the team, and we actually ended up winning the championship those 2 years that I played. Not just because of me, we just had a great team, but I know they regret it because they were telling me no when they didn't see the value in the skills that I had, and I had to show them and prove that I definitely belong to have a spot in the league. So it just gives other women permission. So often we're told no before we're told yes. Ladies, don't let nobody tell you no. If you want to do something, go do it and figure out a way to do it. And then just know that you can bring another sister behind you because you're going to figure out all the rough patches and it's going to be a little bit smoother as more and more ladies become behind you. But you give courage to people and women that you don't even know that you're doing. And so.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, giving them the courage and the bravery to go after that. That's fantastic. Jen, anything you want to add in?
That was so beautifully said. And, when Rochel was talking, it made me think to like Leslie's point where she was like being unapologetic, doing it and not apologizing to anyone. Cause I think first and foremost, that is so important. Like, I think as a society, we're so quick to apologize for people when we're doing something. You're like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm sorry I did that. What are you sorry for? So not being sorry for doing what you did, but what you said about it wasn't just because of me. It's because we had a really great team. That's what makes you a trailblazer. You are not only paving the way, but you're not even giving yourself the credit that you deserve because you're like, it's not just me. And I think that that's what we need to continue to do because we see our worth, we know our worth, but we want other people to see theirs as well. And when we're bringing them along and being like, I know I'm pretty amazing, but we're all amazing when we do this together. And I think giving that self-confidence and really pushing through, because you said that and I was just like, that is it. That is it. That is that teamwork. It's that mentality. It's bringing, taking that hand through that fire and saying, come with me. Because that's what fuels my fire when I do the things that I do, everything I do. When I get those messages and people are like, oh, what you posted, like I cried. And I'm like, wait, you cried? I'm like, I didn't post that for you, but I did. But every time I post on social media or every time I do something, I said, I do it as a reminder for myself. But then I remember every time I'm doing that, who am I affecting by doing that? And it's life-changing.
It is. And I think so many times, we're taught this concept of competition. But if we go back to the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, there were so few seats at the table for women that competition was fostered high value. And I don't think we were necessarily encouraged again, to be who we were. But times are changing, and now the seats are there. And we have to remember, there is enough room for all of us. Again, building that team and opening the doors, not just for other women, but for every person, that is out there. Because when we invite everybody to the table, we, get to, bring in so much beauty from all different angles. I want to also go back to this concept because all of you touched on it, this concept of speaking up and using our voice. Leslie, I want to start with you because I know that this is really something that you work with. I think many times when, as young girls, we speak up, and Rochel, you kind of said this in jest that, you were the one with the mouth that was always going to do that. So many times we encourage girls to lighten that, to diminish that, because they're going to be bossy or bitchy or whatever it is. But Leslie, this is something you really especially work with people on, is learning to teach them to protect their voice, to engage in their voice. So when we talk about a trailblazer as being somebody who uses their voice and encourages others to use their voice, I'd love to have you speak to that. But how can we make sure we're doing that productively so that it is opening us up and not shutting us down?
Woo, this is my wheelhouse, because I say that vocalizing your boundaries is 60% of self-defense, right? And so I teach women how to really embody their boundaries, right? So whether you're a recovering people pleaser or someone who just avoids conflict, this concept of energetic protection and reclaiming your voice is really, really important. And I'm going to give 3 important points as to things you can start doing. Number 1 is to stop over explaining your boundaries. Your boundaries are meant to be stated and honored, not to run your mouth. And if you've ever been in a disagreement with your spouse or whatever, and this is the reason why you should be understanding my boundary, and this is the reason why I feel the way that I feel. No. As women, we have to be very clear and succinct as to what our boundaries are, right? So just understand that an anchor statement is 1 sentence. Keep it clear and concise what you're asking for. And this was illustrated during the pandemic when I had so many women that were wildly uncomfortable at the supermarket with people invading their physical space and not honoring 6 feet of distance or whatnot. And I was like, well, what did you say to them? Nothing. And I'm like, so we actually have to reclaim our voice, and we have to hear our voice. So part of what a great boundary is to be clear AF. And you don't have to be aggressive. It's just a matter of being assertive. Hey, you're too close for comfort. Can you please take 3 steps back? That is very clear as to what is needed there. If it's an emotional or time boundary, it really is you know what? I really want to be able to hear you out, but I don't have the bandwidth in this moment. Can we revisit this when I can give you my undivided attention? Okay. So number 1 is stop over explaining your boundaries. Okay. Second is to come up with 1 anchor statement that you can use, right? I don't have the bandwidth right now. I'm uncomfortable with X because, period. And also accept that no is a full sentence. If someone asks you to do something, no, I'm going to decline. You don't need to fill in space. There is empowerment in silence and being tactical with it. And lastly, what I would encourage anybody watching to do when it comes to boundaries is to practice saying them. So a practice that I use is I talk into my phone all the time because I need to hear the peaks and the valleys of my voice. And it amazes me how much people don't practice speaking, but from a self-defense standpoint, sometimes our bodies are not aligning with what we're saying. So that's the key point I want to make here is you think that you're being a badass with your boundary. But if you're like, no, get away,
Mhm.
like this is not exuding confidence. So being body awareness is very key when we are talking about speaking up. Is your body aligning with what you're saying?
Mhm.
Mm.
Wow. Great stuff. Great stuff. Rochelle, Jen, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah,
I agree with everything she said. You know, I was that kid, I was that girl that always got in trouble from my mouth. And it wasn't
same.
what I was saying that was incorrect. It was definitely correct. Um, for all my life, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. But for me is I only know how to say how I say it with my truth. So if that takes you the wrong way or rubs you the wrong way, I'm sorry, but I'm speaking authentically about whatever it is. And I'm not going to be apologetic for you being sensitive because you don't want to hear the truth. You want it sugar coated. And most of the time, sugar coating things doesn't do anything. Like Leslie said, step away, but you're turned. Well, you're in essence, you're sugarcoating it with your body movement. Like, who gonna step away from you and you kind of hunched over and insecure about your presence? Nobody. They're gonna be all up in your face even more. So it's just being confident with what you're saying and being unapologetic for speaking your truth.
Mhm. Yep.
And if people get it, the message ain't for them. And you know what? I could say two bad words, but I won't. But basically,
But you totally can. You totally can.
Exactly. Exactly. Mhm.
Well, and I love how you said that too, talking about, being your authentic self and being, really being forward and not sugarcoating, because that's the what always got me in trouble, right? Especially growing up, just like you, I was the only girl growing up, and so I was always surrounded by boys. I mean, the amount of times I dropped the F bomb in my house, my kids are like, "Mom," I'm like, "I know, don't repeat me."
Oh,
Mom swears a lot, don't repeat me. And for some reason they don't. So like knock on wood. But if they did, whatever. But for me personally, like I've always been told the same thing as you, Rochelle. Always, like, your mouth is what's going to get you in trouble. You tend to say what's on your mind, or you're cocky. I go, no, 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 I'm not cocky, I'm confident. And I'm
Mhm.
really like, if I'm going to say something, this is how I feel about it, and you're going to hear what I have to say. And for so long, oh my god, I love that. And so for so long, it was something that that people pleaser that Leslie was talking about, like we were people pleasing and we were toning it down a little bit. And I realized more so lately than ever, I did such a disservice to people around me in my late 20s and early 30s. And now that I'm in my 40s, I feel like my mind shift is so different, that I was never truly my authentic self. And I did
Mhm.
them the disservice of not letting them know who I was, because I did tone it down even more. And, I've always been the person to say how I feel, but I always would kind of be like, oh, you know what, you're right. And now I'm just like, no, this is what it is. And if you don't like it, then that's okay. You don't have to like what I have to say. And accepting that not everybody's going to be your audience, not everybody's going to agree with you, but being okay at that moment and not going beyond that. So for me, when someone doesn't like something, I'm like, you know what? You have the right to your opinion. If you don't like it, that's fine. Do something
Absolutely.
else. And it's
Yeah.
hard to get to that place. It really, like, it takes years to get to the place where you can go, I don't need it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. I think I remember that one of the first times that I spoke up and used my voice. Now, it probably could have been, presented in a different way. It was in eighth grade, and we had our big project for the year that we're due. And so I had been working on this with one of my friends for months, and we did this. It was a futuristic timeline, and all these things that were going to be happening over the course into the future. And I remember as we were presenting, my teacher was in the back yapping it up with one of the other teachers, not paying attention. And when they came back, she started asking questions. And she was asking questions that I had already discussed. And finally, because she was, nip, and finally I was like, I just looked at her and I was like, well, if you would have been listening, you would have heard me say these things. And I did get in a little bit of trouble for saying that. But I remember, someone asked me, why would you say that? And I said, because she was wrong. And I said, you know what? I worked hard on this. I have spent
right.
hours on doing this, and I was really proud of what I put together. And she didn't even have the decency to listen to what I did. I said, if I didn't do a good job, that's a different thing. But to question what I did when she wasn't even present, that's not okay. And I think that that's, something that always stood with me is, when somebody does something that is not okay, we have to be able to speak up for ourselves. Doesn't mean that we're saying we're right or wrong. But again, when we have to start believing in ourselves, and sometimes, that respect, it's not necessarily earned, it's demanded. And we have to demand that respect, especially when we are putting so much effort and our blood, sweat, and tears into everything we're doing. So I love that, kicking down those walls. So I'm curious because I think we can talk about, are we born this way? Did we learn this way? But I think, there has been people out there, other possibly women, even men, who have, their stories maybe opened the doors for us. So I would love to ask, can you think about somebody that you honor, whether you know them personally or not? Who is somebody that you look to as a trailblazer that maybe modeled some behavior for you? So, Rochel, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I have a connection, deep connection. I have no idea why, but when I think of this woman, it takes everything within me because I want to emulate her strength, her character, her trailblazing, her tenacity, and it's Harriet Tubman. So when I was a very little girl, they used to, depending on what state you were in, but they used to have African American studies, and they would teach you at elementary school and these things. And we had like Black History Week or whatever. And I've always been connected to her. And just kind of like when I was in some kind of feeling some kind of way, I would I guess think of her and kind of channel her. And so when I saw the movie Harriet that was recently made, not too long, a couple years ago, I was on a plane going to San Francisco, and I was like, oh my God, this is why I'm connected to her. As a little girl, I guess I just absorbed something that she had and it's instilled to me. Here it was, this lady who was a slave and freed herself and then went back into hostile territory to free others. And then she not only did that, she worked for the Union Army and was an infiltrator into various areas where it allowed the Union Army to overcome the Confederates. And then not only that, she was a trailblazer for the women's suffrage movement when she knew darn well she was not going to be able to live to see women have a right to vote, because we didn't get that, most women of color, until the 60s. So it was like, of course, yeah, that whenever I think about when I'm in that moment where I'm feeling like a little bit defeated or a little some kind of way, I think, what would Harriet do? And she'd be like, girl, get your butt up. Turn your booty over here. Let me kick you in your booty and push you out forward, and just go do it. And don't be apologetic. Don't worry about it. It will happen how it's supposed to happen. And it will be beautiful, whether good, bad, or indifferent. It will be a beautiful journey and exploration and adventure for you. So that's somebody that I could think of Michelle Obama or Oprah as well. But I think for me, truly, it's Harriet Tubman, because the time she existed and the things she did, women, no matter what color you were, did not do those things. And that kind of sets women a trailblaze no matter who you are. You've got to respect and honor that, because she paved the way for a lot of us, no matter, again, what color you are. So
Fantastic.
that's me.
Thank you. Thank you. Jen, let's go over to you.
So mine's a little different. It's completely 180, and I love that. And listening to you say that, I'm like, wow, I really need to watch that movie, because I already looked at her as a trailblazer, right? And so for me, I definitely think a trailblazer could be a man, a woman, it could be anybody. And for me, it's this one thing that sticks out every time I hear someone say it, and it's kind of weird. It sounds weird to some people, but it's not weird to me. So there's an author who wrote a book called The Child Called It, Dave Peltzer, I believe, and when I was younger, I read his book for the first time. And I remember reading it and just going, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that has gone through this story. And then knowing that he became this famous author, and he continued to go down his path, and he became successful and had a family. And I'm like, that's what I want. That's where I want to be. And as a child who was brought up, abused, a victim of, like abuse, addiction, all of the things, and seeing the things that I saw as a child, I didn't know if my future would be bright. You know, I always had this vision that someday I was going to do big things and I was going to change the world. And when I was younger, I was always told, like, you're going to amount to nothing. You're not going to be successful. I'm the most, I would like to think I'm pretty successful in my own eyes. But, out of everything that I've gone through and every place that I've been, I just always flash back to that moment of when I was reading that book going, I can do this. I can be like, I can get through this and I can actually, achieve big things. I can do big things. And I think about it over and over again, because for me, growing up in a place, where I was abused by my mom, who recently just passed. And I'm actually writing my story about what I went through. And now that I'm the person writing the story, I have that moment where I go back to the story that changed my life. And then I'm like, who am I going to change by telling my story? Because we aren't the only ones that are going through things. We aren't the only person who's creating these paths. But in order for paths to continue to be created, there has to be someone else that does it before us, right? And some of them are big and some of them are small, and some of the smaller stories don't always get told, but those are the stories that might have the biggest impact, and you never know where that's going to happen. So that's what I think of.
Thank you for sharing that. Very powerful.
Double virtual smiley face.
I love it.
My virtual ones for that.
Oh my gosh. So Leslie, what about you?
I had a visceral response when you asked this, so I know it's good for me. And I think that my response is a reflection of some deep internal healing work that I've done over the years in terms of my own intergenerational trauma. But I'm going to say, now that I am a mom, the trailblazer that I look towards is my own mom. And that's an interesting response, because my relationship with my mom is wildly complicated. But, she has assaulted me in front of my kids. She has, we don't have a perfect relationship, but I will tell you this. I have a deep appreciation for someone who decided to make their life and their kids' lives better by immigrating to this country. My mom does not have an education past like high school. She did not speak the language. She had $32 in her pocket. She was raising my brother and I by herself. She bartended in San Francisco Chinatown. She did every which way to make it work, right, with what we had. And I have all these visions in the 80s of, because when we were talking earlier about speaking up, I'm like, that moment when you're like, wait, but I've become my mom. I've had that moment, and it's like, it's interesting to me to come full circle of like, I help empower women with their voices, but where did I get that? I got that from my freaking mom, because there were so many moments in the 80s where I've seen my mom go toe to toe with men, unapologetically herself, them stealing her parking spot. And I used to be so embarrassed that my mom would get out the car and rage with these men and go toe to toe. Yes. But it's because she had that voice and she had that fire in her. And the last story I will share is that what kind of birthed me is because my mom advocated for me, right? Like middle school bus stop, 3 girls, probably named Janie or, Linda, all blondes. Like, yeah, they all like
Heather, Tiffany, all
yeah, it's always something. Katie. They all came to me, and I remember my yellow Sony Walkman, and they crushed it on the ground. They spat in my face. They just because I looked different, every which way to make me feel less than. I remember taking it, and I remember coming home trying to cry into my pillow so no one would hear me. And that was the day my mom signed me up for Taekwondo camp and said, "You're going to learn how to kick the shit out of those girls."
I love it.
And that was my mom, who was just like, "You're going to learn how to kick ass." And 6 months later, it happened again. And yes, did I kick the leader in the gut and make her fly? Yes. But my biggest takeaway is that when the principal brought my mom in, my mom and for the principal to say, like, your daughter created this ruckus and was the issue, for my mom to be the advocate and for my mom to say, like, I don't care, like my daughter defended herself, like, I think that that's why I have so much strength in my voice, because my mom, even though adult me and her can just go toe to toe, it's because we're cut from the same cloth. It's just that grit and that resilience.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to look at that. Very similar. My mom definitely had an impression on me. She was the very first interview I did for my show, talking about these because, again, growing up in the 40s, 50s, when women were, taught to go to college so that they could meet a man and get married. And here it was, as she wanted to be an astrophysicist, just wasn't understood. So it was really cool. But I was going through the TV last night and I was on Amazon Prime and I stumbled across a series all about epic women. And so I'm like, well, I should be watching this. And one of the stories I watched was about Coco Chanel. And, she was a trailblazer in her own right, growing up. And she was dirt poor, which I didn't know, completely poor and orphan. And she had this, talent for seamstressness and seamstressy. I don't know. She was a seamstress. And, but all of the fashions were male dominated. And the one comment she made is, these clothes are stupid. Women have to wear these corsets. These clothes are so, they're binding us together. We need to be free. And she went to an event and she wore her male friend's suit because she's like, we should be comfortable too. And doing those, she was, she embraced her sexuality. She had affairs. She was fine not being married. And I just think, again, she really embodied, here it was before World War I, this idea of, own who you are. And it doesn't matter where you came. She made things happen. She found this one man. And even though she didn't necessarily love him, she's like, he's going to be my ticket out of here. So I'm not saying that we need to go to that extreme. But again, in the early 1900s, women didn't have as many choices. But I think, again, just this message of we have to forge forward on our own terms. And again, that word unapologetic keeps coming up. So I love that. I want to switch over to some of the tactical and strategic ways that we can be trailblazers in what we do. What we know is sometimes we get stuck too. We're none of us are going to come out of this world unscathed. We're going to have those moments where we have setbacks. So when setbacks happen, how, as a trailblazer, do you face those setbacks so that you can use them as a place of reference, but not a place of residency, meaning that you're not going to live in the setback, but you're going to use it as the setup to something bigger? So Jen, I would love to start with you on this one.
Awesome. So thank you. So it's funny when you were saying that, and Leslie, when you talk about visceral responses, like instantly, as soon as you say setback, I am a firm believer that, setbacks they're not a thing. I mean, it is, but it isn't in my eyes. Every time something happens, I tell myself, okay, what is the learning experience from this one thing, right? If we continue to do it over and over, it becomes a mistake. But when something happens, no matter how big or how small it is, I like to try to put myself in the position of going, okay, if this is what happened, what do I have to do to change it moving forward? And I think for me personally, what makes me a trailblazer is when I look at something that has happened, I change it. And then I do it again, but in a different way. Or I say, okay, this didn't work. Instead of going left, let's go right. And I'm very quick to make changes. I'm very quick to make a pivot in a business. If I feel like something isn't working, I'm like, all right, let me just try something else and wait. And, people will say, why did you make that decision? I'm like, well, the first one didn't work. So if that didn't work, let me try something else. And this came up a few times in a few conversations earlier today, was there's a positive for every negative. So if you have a huge setback, there's a huge comeback. Now you just have to figure out what it is to make that happen, right? So every negative, there's a positive, every positive, there's a negative. And when you can start weighing the two together and saying, okay, what did I learn? Now you're going to be even more successful as we move forward. And so I try to do that with everything that I personally do. And my mindset is I actually don't think failure is an option. It's not a thing. Failure for me doesn't, even though the word exists and people say you have to fail in order to succeed or you have to fail forward, I'm like, I just don't believe failure is a thing. Like, we're not failing if we're continuing to get back up over and over again. You're only failing if you actually give up. And I mean, I don't think any of us have given up. So, I mean, that's why we're here, right? So that's
Exactly. Yeah. I
my
think this
thoughts.
concept of failure, yeah, I mean, this concept of failure, it's needed, and we need to stop fearing it. I think about a baby. Think about a baby when a baby is learning to walk. Every time it falls, every
Right.
wobble is a failure, but it learns how to work through that. Because what
Right.
if after the third time they're like, "Oh, I'm failing too much. I don't want to do this." No, they keep trying. And so again, we have to learn to embrace those wobbles that we have, and like you said, learn to pivot and do it in a better way. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Leslie, what about you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got distracted for a second because I was just designing a I Heart Jen Potter t-shirt on my.
I know it's pretty good.
I love you.
And I got you like that the hashtag. What would Harriet do? I'm writing all these things down.
She's flowing, and it's beautiful to see another woman when they're in their flow. And I'm like, ooh, yes.
So setbacks. What do you do when setbacks happen?
When setbacks happen, I think that the framework I use for myself is the same I use for my clients, which is getting back to a mindset of a trailblazer. And I think that the mindset for me is always around identity. Who are you? What do you stand for? Who do you fight for? And those are always a good compass for me. And I think that helps me prioritize what is important to me and what doesn't matter. So like to Jen's point, is like there's really no failure. It's just like now I can relentlessly prioritize. And I'm just micro pivoting along the way. But for me, the mindset of a trailblazer is really, you know what, I'm worth fighting for. And that is the energy that you have to have in order to never give up. Right. And I don't think everybody feels like they have that quality. But when you are able to forge the way as a trailblazer and share your story, to Jen's point, I think that somewhere along the line, other women see a piece of you and their story, and then it gives them a little bit more courage to step forward. So I always come from a warrior's heart, warrior queen over here is like, I feel like we're all in the struggle, but I think that surrendering and being vulnerable, really raw and vulnerable with what we're going through is so freaking important, because it's one thing to go through the struggle or the setback, but like, I'm not faking the funk with anybody. I was like, y'all, I'm going through it. And that's where I feel like it's important to foster communities around honest conversations, not just being like, oh, like I'm netting this like you can make yourself look good to anybody, but I feel like it's in the raw moments that really have you emerge, right? Like your truest self. So I think raw vulnerability, and having a mindset that you're worth fighting for is like two key pillars that are non-negotiable.
And I appreciate that so much, because that's actually the backbone of this entire show is to allow women to share their stories and to be vulnerable for the other women. Because again, we never know who might be needing to hear our words. And that's the exact ripple effect that I wanted to have happen with this show, is to allow everybody to, so that they never feel alone. They never feel like an outcast, that they know that they are safe with who they are. So I appreciate you saying that. So, yeah. So Rochel, let's go over to you. What do you do when setbacks happen?
Okay, so I have a story. So when I was a little girl, I was recruited to run track and field, and because I was fast, I was always beating the boys. And I was put in the 400 to run the 400. It was back then, my day and age, called the 440, which is now the 400 meters. And so I would be out there and I hated it, and I'd be crying and just, being that basically shitty little girl. And so there was this gentleman who would be practicing in the middle of the track, and he came up to me one day and he said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I'm tired of losing. I hate this race. I'm not good at it," so on and so forth. And I said, "I keep failing. I want to be a winner. I don't want to be a failure." Again. So he looks at me, he takes my hands like this, my head in his hands like this, and he says, "Well, you're not failing. You're just learning how to do something better the next time. I looked at him like, dude, what are you talking about? He said, so each time you race, think about what you want to improve upon and go out the next time and do it. And so I was like, long story short, he told me some other things, but I was like, okay. So I thought about what he said. And, I started like, okay, I lost this time because I came out of the blocks too slow. This time I lost because I gave up at the last 50 meters, and I started processing this. This is a little girl, I'm 10. And I started winning because the next time I was coming out the blocks first, I wasn't giving up. I gave it my all at that last 50 meters, and I started winning. And so what I realized was at that young age of 10 that there are no failures. There are only lessons learned on how not to do something the next time, and you can always make improvements. So when I'm feeling those setbacks, as you say, I keep edging forward. I don't care if I have to take. You remember that game, Mother May I? I may be dating myself, but I don't care if I have to, take an inch forward, a micro inch forward. But I always strive to move forward because when you have forward momentum, it keeps you in the ebb and flow of life, and things will open up for you on your path. If you stay stagnant and you just succumb to whatever you consider to be a failure, stagnation brings death. And we want to die. And that was the other thing I used to think about when I was in the emergency room starting IV. I may not get that IV the first time. Well, yeah, if the person's dying on me, they're crumping, I'm not going to get it. But I got 3 tries, and lo and behold, okay, this time I'm not going to go for this vein. I'm going to go for this vein. And so it was always an evolution of continually moving forward and learning what not to do the next time you set out to do something. And eventually you will begin to have more and more successes instead of what we call setbacks.
Exactly. Yeah. So true. So one of the best lessons I learned was from one of my mentors. And, I was in selling real estate at the time. And every Tuesday we had our team meeting. There was 12 of us on the team. And one of the things that we had to do is go around and say, what was our golden moment from the week before? Which was basically, what did I do last week that I screwed up? And what did I learn from it so that I don't do it again? So this concept again of setbacks, of failure, it just started to leave our minds because we learned that pretty much everything is fixable. And when you realize this, going to kind of what you were just saying, Rochel, is again, you don't have to fear it because you can approach it differently. And I think it's such a difference in our mindset in how we look at things. Now I'm like, okay, a setback happens. I might get annoyed at the time, but then I'm like, all right, how can we come back and do this stronger, and really work at making it better, and I think about also all of us have our smartphones. Well, on our smartphones, we have all of these things called apps. How often do we get a notification that we're getting an upgrade? It happens every day because they are never perfect. Every day, those apps are having setbacks, but all they do is they fix them. So we have to think it's the same thing for us. It's just not the best it can be today. It's never going to be perfect, but you know what? You got to, again, just keep improving. And to going to mindset, Leslie, I just want to share this little story, if you don't mind. You can go as deep into it as you want, but you've had a time in your world where you actually were terminated from your position, which a lot of people look at a setback, but instead you celebrated it.
Oh yeah, you mean what happened last week?
Well, okay. I didn't want to call it out.
It's okay. A raw story. Let me tell you. I have been an executive assistant for 20 years of my life, worked for the Federal Reserve, worked for Facebook, worked at this cybersecurity company. Last week, the shittiest thing happened, in the worst way, where they can't even look me in the eye. They terminate me on the spot with no just cause or anything. And in terms of like the level of rage and grief that I felt, that people naturally felt, had I not built a business the last couple of years, had I not worked with a coach and been part of a community to really hone an entrepreneur mindset, that would have broken me, right? Like my ego was bruised for about 20 minutes. And then I posted in the community and I was like, y'all, I just got terminated And this is like the heavens opening up for me. And ever since then, I have been celebrating. I stood in the rain for my spiritual cleansing.
No.
I made some reels with me lighting my badge on fire, purging myself out of my body, throwing swag in the garbage. Like,
Oh, I love that.
I could be me without fear of retaliation.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. And I think it's an important celebration because the old me would have been like, I needed to have all my ducks in a row for when I left my corporate life,
Yep.
right? My 9-month reserve, like, all these things needed to happen in order for me to make the entrepreneurial plunge. But I feel such a level of liberation and empowerment right now because I know that I'm meant for more, right? So I literally am celebrating, and I thought I'd never get to this place, right? Because I have a very like money scarcity. I grew up in that, right? Like, oh my God, I'm gonna be on food stamps again. We're gonna lose our house. But no, it's because I'm cut from a different cloth. I know who I am. And so I have creative freedom, and now I can just go and create what I want in the world.
Exactly. And I think that's, such a powerful lesson because we have to remember, whatever it is that you believe in, the universe, God, whatever, sometimes it's conspiring to support us and it's putting us on the right path. And I think, again, when you can, again, go back to that word that you used before of surrendering, you have this innate faith of, you know what? I'm on my path. I'm going to be okay. And you don't have to live in that fear. You can be uncomfortable for a little bit, but again, it allows you to just reframe it into a different story and again, take that control back.
Yeah. And I think part of that mindset is I got me, right? So when we don't look for an external savior or someone to come save us, right? That's where empowerment really comes. Cause I'm like, I'm the CEO of my company. So I know like things are going to 10x from this point because I know me and I got my own back. Yep. So I will fight tooth and nail out of the gladiator pit.
Exactly. Fantastic. So I want to go over now to this concept of trade-offs because sometimes on the road to creating our path and, getting into alignment of where we need to be, it doesn't necessarily mean we can have it all right now. And sometimes there's trade-offs. Now, all of us on this call happen to be moms. Not everybody listening and watching this is a mom, but this concept of trade-offs. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. With my son, Nicholas. Now he is 18 and he's off in college, but when he was going to, high school and middle school, one of the trade-offs I made is I would be on the road. So instead of going out or doing things afterwards, I made the trade-off of going back to the hotel room so I could get on FaceTime and do homework with him. When he was much younger, I didn't do as much on the road. I did more of the coaching from my home office until he was older and I felt more comfortable being away. So I would love to ask, as you're looking and going, what have been some of the trade-offs that maybe you have had to make? Because I think it's okay to do this because trade-offs are different than compromising ourselves. We don't want to compromise our dreams, but we might have to make concessions along the way. So, who would like to jump in and maybe talk about some of the trade-offs?
That was a total trigger as soon as you said that too, because I feel like that's one of the biggest things constantly happening in my life, right? And, for those who don't know, I do travel a lot for work for several of my businesses and the nonprofit. And as a speaker, I'm on the go and I have small children. My youngest is 3.5. My oldest is 11.5. And my 3.5-year-old is a stage 5 clinger who doesn't sleep. So when I'm not home, it's like shit hits the fan. So for me, we try to say, instead of me traveling weekly, I may travel once, maybe twice a month. And I'm typically gone for 3 to 4 days at a time. And it's really hard, right? It's hard to be away from my kiddos when I'm away. But when I'm home, and I'm very present when I'm home. And so when I'm here, I am bringing my kids to their after school activities. I am at their games. I am at their competitions. This year is actually the first year I'm going to miss my daughter's one dance competition. And I feel like the worst mom ever. And I'm like, you know what, Jen, you've been doing this for a decade. This is the only one you've missed. It's okay, right? It's okay. And it's hard to convince yourself that those are okay sometimes, because sometimes you do have to miss a few things and it's really hard as a parent. But when I'm home, I'm present. And like all my email footers, I actually talked about this in a meeting this morning. If someone sends me an email, it actually says, if it's after 4:30, this is time with my children. And if it's Saturdays and Sundays, this is time with my children, because you'll be there. The email will be there. My kids are only going to get older. And so I try really hard to focus on that. And then it doesn't mean, and now that I'm telling the world this, there are some times where I do work on the weekends or I do work at night when I can, break away from my children. But the thing is I schedule send emails. I do not make myself available for clients. I am very adamant about that, and adamant, like Leslie said, boundaries. I don't owe you an explanation. This is my kids' time and that's it. And it's amazing when you set that boundary. People will tell me they won't call me intentionally. They won't text me. They won't email me. They're like, nope, you said that you're not available, so I just assume you're not going to respond. I'm like, you are absolutely right. And I love it because you set those expectations. And even text messages for me, I actually have no notifications on my phone at any point in time unless it's for my kids. And I only respond to text messages 2 or 3 times a day. And some people are like, I need instant gratification. I'm like, that's great, but that's not part of what I do. And so when people understand those boundaries exist, I'm able to be more present for my children, and I'm able to be present when I'm here. And if I do have to be away, but the travel stuff, it's hard. It's really hard, but we can't compromise those things. Right. And that's hard.
We have to do those. Well, I'm going to make you feel a little bit better and just let you know that I actually missed my son's 8th grade graduation because I was on the road. So
I know, and it's so hard, right?
So
Good.
Hard. His response to me was, and again, he was in 8th grade at the time. His response to me was, Mom, that's okay. You love what you do, and I want you to do what you do. He then followed it up because he is my child and said, besides, I'm sure I'll get a much better present from the guilt that you feel. So
yes, that would be my daughter. Absolutely.
Yes, that's my little cherub. So yes. So Rochel, what about you? What have been some of the trade-offs, and what are some of the things you want to add to this part of the conversation?
Okay, for sure, because I know I have the oldest kids out of the bunch. So when my kids were young, I was building that first telecom business, and my son was an athlete and my daughter was a competitive dancer. So there was many a times I wouldn't miss any of their stuff, right? Because I knew that I only had them for this certain amount of time. And so I wasn't going to miss anything. Plus, they were both, my son was a great athlete and my daughter was she's still a phenomenal dancer. So what I would be doing, and okay, my kids were in the 90s, so this is before the internet. So I would have my computer and I would be in the car, in my truck, vehicle, whatever. And, you at these tournaments, these dance competitions all day long. And I had it down to a science when my kids were going to be up front. And so I'd be in my car working, and then I'd be like, oh, time to go in, see my son play his game, see my daughter do her one of 7 dances that she did, and get back in the car and do it. But the funny thing is, when I was the president of the National Association of Women Business Owners, I could have my son take into practice and stuff, but I didn't have that aspect with my daughter. So I would put her in a suit, bring her to the board meetings with me or the meetings, and other moms started adopting that behavior as well. Put the girls in the back, give them some paper, let them be little secretaries. And that way she was able to be with me, and I was able to have that moment with her. And then we'd drive home and she talked about it. The funny thing is, last year when I had my event in San Francisco and you ladies were there, Clara, later that afternoon or that evening, my daughter told me, you know what, Mommy, I am so grateful for you because you let us do everything we wanted to do and you were always there. Now, you may have been in the car working or outside sitting on a bench working or whatever, but when it was time for us to be front and center, you were always there. And I could always count on looking in the audience and seeing you. And my son was like, I could always count on you being back there doing that, that motion when he played basketball or football, or when they ran track and field or whatever. And so for me, it was just, I didn't have that. Like, I don't think my mom ever came to see me play baseball. She had to hear it from other people. My dad came to my track and field meets, but I didn't have that support. And I didn't want my kids to ever feel like I didn't support them no matter what they were doing. So I would move the earth to be at whatever it is that they were doing to support them, to let them know that even though I might be busy, I always, always have time for you in my life because I know you're going to grow up one day. And I hope that what I'm instilling in you, you will absorb it and then do that and pass it forward when you have kids. And so, yeah.
And
But
I think
sometimes, y'all,
yeah, I think it's so important to do what you said again, to bring your kids along, when they're age appropriate. And even if you don't have your own children, nieces, nephews, I think it's important that they see us living our dreams and they see us doing these things because, again, we want them. All of us would tell anyone in our family, go after your dreams, go after your dreams. But we need to show them that we're doing it too. We need to model that behavior. So I love that.
Absolutely.
So, Leslie, let's go over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Jen and Rochelle said because like my son is 6 and my daughter's 3. So what I'm hearing from Jen is like when I'm with them, right? Like everybody else can wait. And then with Rochelle, it's about being a role model and really leading. For me, I received this question twofold. The trade-off for me has been grieving and mourning friendships that no longer serve a purpose for me. It is the recognizing when people don't see your vision or don't believe in you, or I feel like we need to be more candid as entrepreneurs in talking about when people in our life that we thought would be down for us aren't down for us when we make that shift, or when they see us rise and it forces them to evaluate their own situation. And you think that that would be all love, but for me, it hasn't been. And so every year, I feel like every birthday, I'm like, man, I got to disconnect from someone else. And that used to really eat me up, right? To be someone so loyal to a fault and just be like, man, I was so sure that this person and I were going to be friends forever and ever. But the trade-off is like, I let go of like 6 toxic people or people that drain my energy. And I meet people like Jen and Rochelle and yourself. And that's the trade-off, is that you might
Agreed.
actually meet people who you just met and you have more of a connection with them than people who have been rolling with you for 20 years. And that was a really hard process for me to learn from, but it makes me very intentional on who I'm chatting with or investing time with. Because if you don't mean anything to me and the trajectory I'm going on, like I'm going to be with my kids. So I'm not wasting my time on BS people, to be honest. And then the second thing for me is the trade-off has been quality time with my husband. And what I mean by that is that as I'm building my business, is the day-to-day time with each other less? Yes. So the need to actually come together, because it's easy, right? To just like fall asleep on the couch and not build a connection or whatever. We have to be very intentional about coming together about our vision, right? So that he doesn't feel like I'm neglecting him and he has his own business and we're leaving for Thailand next week. And for us to come together and be like, okay, well, we can't really go on trips together like we used to. Everything is about the kids, but what are our agreements? And the agreement is like, yeah, we're going to go to Thailand for 2 weeks without our kids. That is our one trip a year where we focus on each other and
nice.
there's nothing
Love
that's
that.
perfect. Like we're not going to have weekly date night. Like that's just not realistic for us. So really coming together and co-creating as to like what are our priorities, what the trade-off is like, yeah, we're not going to have as much time together, and making sure that that doesn't strain our marriage, and being very honest about where we are and communicating like, you know what, I'm feeling like we're not really making time for each other is a hard trade-off, because sometimes I will just keep working. And he's going to be like, hey, but I need, some time. And so I think the trade-off has been knowing when to pump the brakes and say, you know what, this doesn't need to be done right now in my business. Like, not only do my kids need me, and I will always pump the brakes for them, I need to show my husband that same grace.
Yeah, I think that is so well said. And I think that that is something that so many people, whether they're a trailblazer or not, if they're a solopreneur building their business, it's really important that they understand that, because like you said, it is a trade-off. Eventually your kids will be older and you'll get back to being able to do a lot of those things. So it's not that today is your forever reality. It's the trade-off for right now, and being able to, again, have the open dialogues, but also have those agreements. So I appreciate that. I do want to go back for a moment to your original comment, because as you stated that was one of the questions I did want to bring up, is what do we do when not everybody understands what we're trying to do? Because Leslie, you're not alone. I have had that happen a few times over my life where I don't want to use the word outgrow, but I'm sort of like, I'm not in the same place. And, people, they look at me like I'm crazy sometimes. And, what am I doing? And I actually even had someone say to me when I got divorced, you're making a mistake. You're doing a disservice to your son. And yeah, exactly the same face, Leslie, that you're making is what I was making, and again, I've lost people too. And I've had to make the conscious decision, conscious uncoupling with some of my friends. So Rochel and Jen, I would love to hear from you. Have you gone through some of that? And, how did that impact you? How did you, come to terms with that kind of trade-off of having to let some relationships go?
It's hard, right? And as Leslie was saying it and listening to you say what you just said, it's I paused for a second and I looked down and I'm just like, I felt that, because there have been so many times where over the past several years where I've had to be okay with letting some friendships go because of that happening. And I came to this actual realization of friendships are like regular relationships with our significant others, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever that may be. They're not always in our life for the long haul, right? And I think if we look at every relationship as parallel, whether it's a significant other or a best friend, they may be here today, but they may not be here in 6 months from now. Anyone who's gone through a divorce or a long-term relationship, and that sometimes that person's not going to be there for the long haul. And I think understanding that that's okay. And it's really hard, right? Leslie said, like, it's really hard to let those people go sometimes, because you're like, oh, I thought we were going to be best friends. But then you get on a call like this and you're like, oh, wait, I have like these amazing women that, like, after one call, I was like, oh my God, I need to stalk them on social media and we need to be friends, right? And so every time Clara introduces me to someone else, I'm like, I know this is going to be an amazing person, because we started putting these people who we really want to have in our lives. And I think one of the hardest things is, and Leslie kind of hit on it, is how having children and a business and a significant other can just weigh on us so much, because there are relationship strains. If you don't take the time to make it happen, if your significant other they don't have to have the vision that you have, but they have to have the belief in your vision. And when you don't have the support, or you don't have the person who's pushing you along as you're going, those relationships are gonna strain on you and strain on all the things that you're doing. And how are you going to react to it? And just continue, like when you said, I'm going on to Thailand for 2 weeks without my kids, I'm like, oh my God, I love my kids so much, but I wish, and it's really hard. And I travel a lot. I travel so much that it puts a big strain, because I'm the one always going. He's always the one home with the kids. Mm-hmm. So it's trying to really, like, foster those relationships that it really mean something, and letting go of the ones that they may have meant something, but if they can't see your vision and they can't support you, you need to let them go. And it's hard. It's so hard.
It is. Rochel, do you have anything you wanted to add in?
Oh, yeah. So I'm probably the queen of this, and I learned this at a very young age. Not everybody is meant to be on your journey with you the whole entire part of your journey. Mm-hmm. And I've always, again, I've always had way more guy friends. Like, I would hang out with the guys, go to the club with the guys. We get to the club, I go my way, they go their way, we hit up, you know what I mean? And I would have one or two girlfriends, but I learned at a very young age that when it's time for people to exit your life, it's okay. It's not a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of your relationship. It's just that you both have evolved into a different aspect of yourself. And you can't, they don't have the capacity or space for you as to where you are right now at this moment in time. Because if you stay there, you'll get again stagnant, stuck, and die, right? And be miserable and all of that. But if you allow that space to open up, then you get to meet wonderful, beautiful ladies like you ladies, and you continue the journey. So I've learned this. I've learned it at a very young age, and I can. The other thing with me is I'm super intuitive, which is really good, but sometimes it can be really traumatizing because I can tell who's meant to ebb and flow with me when I'm ebbing. We in our 5-inch heels, and we strutting, or we're in our sneakers and we headed to the gym, or we just looking cute and just walking around the park, whatever. I just know. And I also know, like, when people come into my life, they come in for a reason. And sometimes people are just there for a short time to show you something, teach you something, educate you in certain some, or just support you when you don't even know you need the support. And when that's done, they have to go, because the divine has to open up, has to have space for someone else to come in to take you further. So as you evolve and transform on your journey. So I'm a true believer that, yeah, it's sometimes sad, but I don't hold on to the energy or it, because I've learned young time ago that it can fester in you, and and when things fester inside you, they create little sores, and those little sores turn into cancers, and then they end up affecting you in way more detrimental areas than you want to experience. And so, I've had a lot of loss, and I've had a lot of beautiful beginnings, but I'm just comfortable with who flows in my life, because I know they're meant to be, and whoever I'm no longer associated with, they're not. Now I have one friend, my best friend. We've been friends for 44 years. Best friends. I could call her and she'll be here in a minute. And the same with me. I don't see her very often. And it was so funny. My event in San Francisco I recently had, I hadn't seen my friend since 2020 when her mom passed away. But she surprised me. She saw I was in town. She surprised me, and it was just so magical. We get together and we're just like, girl, yeah, we 15 again. Ain't nobody handle all of us. And then she had to go on, she was going on. But it was just like, it's magical. So when you have those one or two as I call ride or die chicks, that you know that if you having a bad day, you're PMSing, you're menopausing.
Yeah, seriously.
The kids just ain't acting right. You want to drop kick them like nobody's business, or the husband, he getting on your nerves. You got that one friend, you're like, girl, you got 5 minutes. Just let me vent. And they'd be like, all right, girl, go ahead. You good? Yeah, I'm good. All right. And you go on, and vice versa. I think that's just the evolution of relationships. And it's good, bad, or indifferent, but I think it's just the evolution of just being your beautiful self and your beautiful soul, just having that beautiful journey as you travel, as I say, down your path of bliss.
Exactly. And it is that evolution. And I would just encourage, anybody that's following this, if you don't feel that you have the support, go out and find it. All of us found each other in these different ways. And I just think about where I am in my chapter. I just relocated to Scottsdale, Arizona. I don't have a significant other. My son is now in college. My whole family lives in California. I'm really here all on my own, but I'm not alone, because again, I have embraced and been open to meeting a lot of these new people, and to, again, make sure that I'm taking time to nurture all of these. So again, rather than focusing on the loss, focus on the gain. Again, go out and find your people, find your tribe, and get connected, because you do need that support around you. So one of the things I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to read this passage. Most of you have probably already heard it. It's called Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. But I think it really embodies a lot of what we're talking about here by, pushing past the fear, by using our voice, and by being a trailblazer. So I would love to read it, and then, ask each of you to maybe comment on what you took away from it and how you can see this impacting Your life as a trailblazer and maybe some others. So here we go. Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. And it is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So I'd love to ask who would like to jump in and maybe share something that stood out for them as going through that.
Well, as soon as you were reading it, Clara, I think what came up for me automatically is looking at where I am today and where I was previously. I think that there was a legit fear of success. Mm-hmm. And when I say that, sometimes people think that's weird. And I'm like, no, I actually played small because I was held back by a couple of things. Growing up with a money scarcity mindset, it was always implanted in me that money is the root of all evil. So that somehow becoming successful, you can't do good things with that, right? So you're selling out and you can't do good in the world with that. So that was a block. And I think that the other portion for me as growing up as an overachieving Asian was like, you've got to be excellent at everything, right? Like A++. And I put so much pressure on myself. I put so much pressure thinking that everything had to be perfect. And I was sabotaging myself. And the inner dialogue I was exerting towards myself, I was the attacker. Nobody else was holding me back. Like I was the person in my shit getting in my way. So when you're reading that, I'm like, now I release myself. But it has taken such a long time to not be fearful of being strong, being powerful, being successful, because I understand what my values are, what my identity is, and the impact I truly want to make on the world.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rochel, what about you?
So when I was a little girl, I was always questioned or told or asked, who do you think you are? You think you're better than us? You think you're better than everybody? And it was really because, I'm fair complected with freckles. And well, I think that's one of the reasons. But I guess I just had this light about me that I just knew I was better than the circumstances that I was surrounded. And I always knew that I would grow up and not be in those circumstances. I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know what that meant, but those words resonated in my head. So every time I went to do something, I strive to be the best because, I am better than you. And yes, I am better than these circumstances. And so when I hear those words that Marianne Williamson wrote, it's like I had this light as bright as our sun that I didn't see, but I knew I was in it. I didn't see it. Sometimes when you're in the shit, you can't see it, right? Look, when you're in it, you can't see it.
I love her little emojis. Those are great.
It's really funny.
But I always knew that, I just knew that I was, I won't say destined for greatness, but destined for greatness within my own capacity and in the cup that I'm supposed to fill. And so when I hear those words, it just completely solidifies that I gave myself permission as a little girl to do what I wanted to do and to be where I wanted to be and to ebb and flow how I wanted to flow. When I first got married, my Sicilian side of the family were like, when you gonna have kids? Is something wrong with him? Is something wrong with you? Because everybody was having kids when they were like get married, have kids 19, right? I told one of my aunts, I said, you can have kids and not even enjoy it. All you got to do is lay there. And she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. But fast forward, later, like several years later, she was like, you were so right. She goes, I was so offended because you always had that mouth and we always knew not to ask you. You was going to tell the truth, even if you knew you were telling the truth or not. She goes, but I totally support what you say now, because what we did in our generation was not meant for you in your generation. And you've epitomized that, and you've set an example for the future females in our family to be an example and not be a follower. And so when I hear those words of Mary Ann Williams, I'm like, yeah, that resonates completely with me. And I've always been that badass little chick, and I believe that we all have our own light, and we shouldn't let anybody dim it based on what their experiences are, what they see for themselves. We own it, we claim it, and we just go forth and do what we're here to do.
Oh, love that.
That was so
Fantastic.
good. I could
Yeah.
feel it when you were saying it. I love that. And I love your stories. Every time you tell a story, I'm like honed in and I'm like already visualizing like the whole thing. So I'm totally here for it.
Yeah, y'all, I did slip in a bunch of this on the way, but again, it's those lessons you learn,
Right.
so not to make those mistakes in the future. But yeah,
You
thank you
do.
so much.
No, I love them. And when I was listening to that story, it was something I needed to hear again today, because I feel sometimes we need to hear this all the time, right? Like, yesterday I'll tell, like, this is talk about raw moments. I had like a breakdown yesterday. I was just driving, and then all of a sudden I just started crying. I'm like, it's fucking full moon. And all of these emotions, right? I'm like, I can't do all the things. And I'm like talking to myself, of course you can do all the things. You do all the things every day. Now pick up your shit. And I cried, and then afterwards I was like, okay, I'm fine. I can go back and doing all the things I need to do, right? Because we're trailblazers and we're people who take on the world. Sometimes we realize we take on a lot of things, right? And then the outside forces sometimes make us believe that we can't do it all the time. And then I had to stop and say, of course I can do all of this. I just need to take a breath, and then I just need to continue to focus. And I was fine after that moment. But listening to you say that, it resonated with what someone said to me recently. When I walk into a room, and I'm being very confident when I say this, not conceited, right? When I walk into a room, I know I radiate a lot of energy. My nickname is Sunshine. People say it to me all the time. They just say there's something about you that just radiates, right? And it's this confidence, it's this energy that I know that I possess, and I want other people to feel it. So I really focus on radiating that energy when I come into other places. But sometimes when we go through things, or things are happening and circumstances happening, sometimes our energy isn't coming all around us. Sometimes it's just coming out, but we're not allowing it to come in. And more recently, I've had like this moment where I wasn't fully letting it in because of fear. And that happens sometimes. I'm going through a really big growth in my business and my life, and I'm ready to take that next like leap into something big that I'm working on. And it's that moment of fear. And I said this to another life coach. I said, I don't know what it is. I was like, I feel like that there's this ball of light inside of me that's ready to just like explode at any moment. And I said, but it's not. So it's just sitting there, and I'm just like doing this. And she goes, because you're not allowing yourself to receive it. And as soon as she said that to me, I was like, wow, it made a lot of sense. She's like, what are you scared of? I'm like, I'm scared of success. Like, I am finally at the point in my life where all of the visions that I had, like you said, Rochel, as a child, I didn't come from anything. And I was always told I didn't deserve these things. I didn't come from something. What did you do to get to that point? I worked fucking hard to get here. I created my success. And someone said to me in front of me, my vision that I've never said out loud. I've never said this out loud to anybody. And I said this to another, a peer of mine who I greatly respect. And he looked at me and he said my vision out loud, and a tear came down my face. This was just a week ago. And I looked at him. I'm like, fuck, I never said that to anybody. And he goes, you don't have to say it. I feel it. And as soon as he said it and started talking about all of the things that led me to this moment and where I'm going, I go, everything that I've manifested has come true. Everything that I've wanted to happen, I have made happen. And it was through that moment where we have that fear. And like you said, Leslie, when you're able to say, you know what, my fear is my own success. And then, but you allow yourself to feel it and you allow yourself to grow. Infinite possibilities. We all have this God-given ability. God gave us all, whatever you believe in, the universe or God or whatever, but we all have this natural born ability. And when we find it, it's like our soul path just aligns. Everything just seems like you're going in the trajectory that you should be going because you're following your path. And when we really start to resonate with it, I think that's why we shine. And that's why we all came together, right? So I digress. But
That
I'm
was
a ball of
fantastic.
energy about to explode. So things are going to happen.
I know.
People.
I love it. That's wonderful. So, we've been
Beautiful.
talking for, almost an hour and a half, and I want to start to,
Crazy.
bring this to a close, but I want to really, again, acknowledge and highlight each and every one of you, because you all have just done amazing things to not just, impact your lives, but to impact the lives of those around you. So I want to just give each of you a moment or two to just share, what is it that you're working on now? Do you have any new programs, any upcoming events, anything that you want to share with the audience so that they can follow you, they can learn from you, and help you be a part of your growth? We're going to put all of your information in the show notes so they'll have the contacts. But Leslie, let's start with you. You have this new chapter opening up for you outside of going to Thailand for a couple of weeks. What is next for Leslie?
Ooh, so much stuff is coming, y'all. Now that I have this Hadouken fireball of energy, I I'm really concentrated on continually to globally speak, right? Like returning to Kenya in September with our own group, continuing to help women impacted by gender-based violence. So that is one reason to continue to follow me, is that we are helping women globally. But secondly is you're not going to be able to catch up with me, so y'all got to follow me on the socials. I'll be wilding out on the reels and the videos, but my concentration this year is building the experiences that are really going to empower women. And so not only am I going to Thailand, I will be creating retreats in Thailand and other beautiful spaces for women to come together, and really honed in on sacred rage, like being okay and being comfortable in your anger and using your pain into your personal power. So I'm really focused on experiences. And the other part of my focus is on VIP mother and daughter experiences. So that's another reason to follow me. And then I am going to be rolling out my Woman Warrior Uprising program, which is for folks that want to do it self-paced. So kind of the things we were talking about today of like, how do I use my voice better? How do I get better about speaking up? Because it's one thing to tell people to speak up, but actually giving them a framework. Or if you're someone who's like, I don't really know how to advocate for myself in the workplace, or I don't know the first thing of what I would do if someone grabbed me by the wrist. All of this online curriculum is coming. So good reason to follow me, and to see where you want to fit into all of that.
Beautiful. And I know that you've done some great corporate seminars. So again, some corporations are bringing you in to do some team building with them. So you got a lot going on. So love that. Jen, let's go over to you.
Awesome. So that's a lot to follow. So let's see. So why to follow me? Just because I'm crazy and I love, spreading all that love. But, I focus on women empowerment. That's really big. I do have a conference coming up, and Clara is actually our keynote. So thank you for that. And it's so amazing when things just start to come in full circle. I was talking about this morning, and, that was just kind of a piece of it. Just bringing our local community together for community over collaboration, bringing women who do a lot of similar things together. I think that was really important. And, like you said, when we were talking about this earlier, continuing to just bring people together. If we can make a change here, it's going to change the future. So if we do it little by little, right? So I'm working on that. I recently became the host of Networking Now. Thank you again to Clara for that. So another one of those amazing connections that just kind of brought full circle into a lot of the things that I do, because networking has been the reason why I've been able to create the network that I personally have. And, I have several businesses. A lot of them are very different, but they're all very similar. And I've been working on this new initiative for really working with the opioid epidemic. And it's something completely different than what I'm working on. So when people hear it, they can be like, say what? I'm really big on workforce development and, rehabilitation of, people affected by abuse and addiction. And as I am the direct product of a child who has been greatly affected by abuse and addiction, and that's what inevitably my mom passed away from. And I knew that, kind of going through the trauma that I went through of my childhood, spent the past year actually writing a book on getting through it. And as I came to the end of writing the book, my mom actually did pass away. And so it was like the universe literally saying to me, like, not that I'm healed, but you will be healed. And this is your focus. And the more I started really focusing on my next chapter and what I'm working on next, it just seems like it started to fall more into place. It started to think the things that were supposed to be, I'm supposed to work on, they're falling into place. And it's really helped me to, just kind of shift my mind. So I'm working on a lot of different things. And, I want people to just kind of follow along and see you can do all the different things. And, you can really make a change in the world. And that's kind of, I want to make a small change. So
Beautiful.
That's
Fantastic.
yeah.
I know. And
love it.
Rochelle, what about you?
Well, yeah, so I've got these two businesses, the male business and the female business. But what I'm really working on, a couple things. First of all, I'm going to share with you ladies. I published this book last November.
Very nice.
And I published this book. I shouldn't say I published. This book was published by Balboa Press and Hay House, as well as in November. My Unstoppable Woman's Manifesto book is really about owning and being the queen that you are. And what I did with that book is I channeled Queen Nefertiti and took 12 distinct lessons that I've utilized over my life as a successful entrepreneur that she utilized in her life to be the queen that was in an era where things were changing. So they were going from many gods in Egypt to one because her husband, Pharaoh Akhenaten, was doing that. And she was instrumental in supporting him and building her own empire. And I say, as queens, we need to build, command, and expand our empire. So I used that book and put some goodness in there that will help people. But not only that, so go get the books. Basically.
Yeah. And we'll put links to the books in the comments so that they can go and buy the books.
The other thing is I decided that as a queen, for me, what was key was community connection and collaboration. And every time I was in a community that I had the real heartfelt connections, I was able to collaborate, and my businesses just went through the stratosphere, which is one of the reasons why I was able to take my telecom company in 6 years from this little company to being one of the top 50 women-owned businesses in Silicon Valley. So I've created the Bold, Unstoppable Women's Community. And it's all about building, expanding our empires as queen, but being in a community where you can connect and you can collaborate and you can share, just like what we're doing here today. I know something I'm going to, I'll share with Jen and Leslie and you, Clara, and vice versa. But it's together, this community that allows us, one, to be unapologetically for being the bold, unstoppable chicks that we are. And two, you get the support and the uplifting, so heartfelt uplifting to be able to stand on your platform in your 5-inch red bottom heels with your mini skirt on and your crown, which I'm not wearing today, and be like, yeah, I am that badass chick. And just watch me, because I got a sea of sisters behind me, and we're going to rise up. And one day we're going to go across the world, and we are going to be the ones that are the change agents. And we are going to be the ones that are in those commanding positions where we decide what we do with our own bodies and not let other people decide or try to take what we have away from us, right? So that is really instrumental. And then I think Leslie Lew and Clara, you may have been on that show I had that back in the day called Real Talk.
Yes.
Well, Real Talk is evolving into a show again, and it's called Bold, Unstoppable. And we will have these dialogues about issues that affect us women and how we can come together as a gender to support each other. But not only that, there's a docuseries that's in the making right now for the Bold, Unstoppable Women. And it's going to be right now, it's a 3-episode series, so I haven't released any information out about that. But if you're a bold, unstoppable woman and you got a story to tell as to how you became that bold, unstoppable woman, and you have messages to share with others coming along, then you might want to connect with me, because there's some good things. I got so much, y'all, but it's because I have time. My kids are grown, so I can assign them tasks,
Exactly.
Be like, hey,
those trade-offs are now paying off, huh?
Me sitting in the car with my computer, getting hot on my legs. But yeah, that's me. And of course I have my podcast, the Blissful Living podcast, and all of you have been on there. So I can go on and on and on. But basically, I just want to create a space for women like us to be unapologetic for being the bold, unstoppable, badass queens that we are. And it's time. There's so many times that I come across women that are apologizing for their greatness. And I'm like, what the hell are you apologizing for? Why? Why are you apologizing for being great at doing what you do? This is your destiny. So,
yeah, well said.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for being a part of this. I know all of you on a personal as well as a professional level. And not only do I like you, I just admire all of you so much. The things that you're doing to not just, enrich the lives of the people that are your clients, but you're all humanitarians and you all are focusing also on giving back. And that's what I think a true trailblazer does. And, the impacts that you are having are going to be on a global level, and the ripple effects are going to be happening for generations to come. So having you here and taking time out of your busy days, I really honor you doing that. And I am just so appreciative of that. And I just really just want to say, thank you so much for being here and for being a part of this special so that we can, again, shed these messages of strength, of insight, help ignite the fire with all those women and the future generations of women. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
thank you, Clara. Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to close some things off with just a little moment of clarity. Man, how much fun was that? I don't know about you, but I took so many notes. And again, each of these women, not just give of their blood, sweat, and tears, but they give of their heart. And when I knew I was putting this together, these are the three women who are at the top of my list. And I know so many others, but I really just believe so much in the messages that they have. So some of the things that came up, the two words that came up so many times were unstoppable and unapologetic. You've got to go after your dreams, and you have to do them and not be shy. If you don't know how to do it, find the way. If it doesn't exist, create it. You have a place and you have a purpose here. So you need to go out and you need to make sure that you're letting that happen. It might take you some time. You might have doors slammed in your face. And I guarantee you, some people will tell you no. But again, don't let that stop you. We talk about this concept of failure. Start to embrace failures. There's a wonderful book, and I'm forgetting the name of the author right now, but it is called The Book of Mistakes. And the idea is go out there and make mistakes. That is how you learn. That is how you get to where you're going. Even Thomas Edison, remember, it's not that he failed 10,000 times. He learned 990,000 ways or whatever of how not to have a light bulb work. You just need that one. One of the things that this reminded me of is something that I was listening to from Les Brown, who's another speaker. And he says, you can have reasons or you can have results. There are always going to be a million reasons why something can't happen. What we want to do as trailblazers is go for the results. Again, just like Leslie said in the beginning, when you see that fire, you just go for it. You just go around it and you keep going. And then you pull some other people with you saying, hey, I've got you. This is the path that we can take. And then the idea of, again, using your voice. It's not conceited. When you are coming from a place where you truly want to deliver value and impact, speak up. It's not conceited to share your dreams. It is not conceited when you're sharing these things because it's with the intention of helping others. So I appreciate all of you for following and for being a part of this special. I encourage you to not just like it, rate it, and give us a review, but please share it with others. Bookmark it and make sure that your younger generations are listening to this. And not just the women, but all people that are out there, because we all have a chance to blaze our own trail and, again, to create success on our terms. And if you're looking for more support, go ahead and check out my community, which is called the Lioness League, where we are coming together in the areas of mindset, productivity, and leadership, helping you, again, to build the support you need, but also to get those key strategies so that you can take that knowledge and start putting it into action. And again, making sure that the world is hearing you roar. So I'm Clara Capano. Thanks again for being here for this special on women winning their way. Until next time.